All right, you ready to roll?
Ready to rock and roll.
All right. So we're back with chapter 5, Atonement. What is atonement? Drain of the Dragons, Nightmare House, Sword of Sacred Duty, the Psychedelic Van, Five Mistakes, Holy and Unholy Aspects of All Religions, and Processing Karma in 3 ways. At this point in chapter 5, you're going through a lot of atonement.
Yes.
And you speak of memories of our soul haunting ourselves and keeping us from having peace. And then one of your first experiences is with the Amazonian women and the silken angels and the water dragons.
Yep.
Would you like to share that experience?
Sure. In its entirety, or just like
Well, if you want to boil it down to like what's the, you
well,
know,
it was a lifetime where I was married to a king, and the king had allowed me to go off to the island of the Amazons because there were stories of these Amazonian women. And we had 3 children. I remember this. There were all these difficulties on the way to get there. Wasn't easy to get to the island of the Amazons.
yeah,
Um,
because there's dragons.
well, there were dragons, yes, which was the big thing. And
It
you
could
would get
kind of,
to the edge of this, it's almost like an inlet, I guess. And in order to get to the island, you had to get through this part of the water, which was filled with dragons. What I quickly learned was that there were all these spiritual practices that the Amazonians had perfected in pulling their energy in. And also later I discovered it was more the transmutation of their souls, which made them different. But that was how you would get to the island.
yeah, you had to pull back your aura because the
Yes.
dragons could detect someone's aura. So you had to pull it.
Yes, and once they detected it, they would come out and come after you. And the dragons were a personification of the karmic nature of the soul. So when you would go there, getting to the island was not much of a problem, as the dragons didn't bother people coming in, but they were really hard on people going out. And so once you got into the island, it was like you went into initiation mode. So,
And,
back to the initiation mode, right?
and a lot of people never returned.
Right. Most people, once they went there, they never returned. And that was one of the mythologies that the king was concerned about, because no one would ever return. They assumed they'd all been killed. But it turns out that most of these people go to the island and they enter into this transformation process, and they become new men, so to speak. They become the silken angels of the Amazonian island. And how does that happen? They go through this process. In my case, I met the dragon master, who was this aged old man who taught me the secrets of the book of the drain of the dragons. What is the drain of the dragons? It's draining the karma out of your interior dragon, your reincarnation, your karma, all of your delusions, your rage, the dragon is all of your out of control desires, your out of control angers, your out of control greed, your cravings. Buddhism calls it cravings. And so it's learning to tame your inner dragon. And it goes through this process. I'm just refreshing here as to because there was this battle that I went through in order to transform into the silken angel, which the silken angel is the purified being. And there were a bunch of the Amazonian women were actually silken angels, and they were really beautiful, but they were the personification of the purified being after the karma has been expelled, driven out. I'm trying to think of the one word that really is used up. to a certain extent,
Mm.
because you're really just kind of pulling it out until there is no more. And then all of a sudden there's this awakening. And this is what happens with that little battle with the dragon. And so when I got to the Amazon island, I noticed that the Amazonian women, I believe, were basically walking around naked, and that their strength was not physical, it was spiritual.
Mm-hmm.
And that many of the souls, some of them were just regular like people, and some of them were these silken angels. Silken angels were like pink, and they had these very iridescent pink gowns, and they flew above the little city thing. The dragon master kept changing identities from male to female. And he spoke about how he carried that sacred book, and that sacred book was the book of the drain of the dragons. So he had set up a protective crystal enclosure for pupils to learn from this book and be protected from the wrath of the dragons while they were learning. And there is where you could learn about this. He said, don't worry. One of the secrets of the dragons is that they can only see your auric field. The Amazonian women have learned to draw in their energy around the shore, so they will not be seen. We are protected by the crystal enclosure until you learn this technique as well. And so this is what we were learning with the book of the Drain of the Dragon, is learning to draw in your energy. And that is partly what we're doing when we are purifying the karmic field in our soul. It's not just something we're doing on the Amazonian island. This is something that we're doing in the purification of our karma. We're learning to draw in our energy, because it's kind of an important point. Mm-hmm. Karma is something that reaches out into the world. One of the things that I wrote about somewhere in the books is that karma has a tendency to bump off of one another. So when you see souls that are engaged in karmic pursuits, you'll kind of like, it's almost like one of these old pinball machines where all the balls are bumping into each other. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. That's like karma. And when you're purifying the karma, you're learning to step away from that, because the purified soul is learning to stop reaching out, pulling the aura out into all of these frays. This is the nature of karma, is to reach into all of this earthly activity. In Buddhism, they speak about, removing the roots of all action. That's kind of what this is. We are removing the roots of all of our action. And in order to remove the roots of our action, we're kind of learning to understand these roots. Where did it originate? Why are we doing this? Because it's so habitual, we have to kind of step back and begin to understand, why did we start doing this in the first place? Why do we keep doing it? And then the process begins to stop allowing the energy to keep going outside. Because once we continue to do this, have the energy continue going out, it's always going to be drawing in these karmic, we're always going to be bumping off of other souls, bumping off of other karmic programs. We're always going to be generating karma. Once a soul begins to learn to draw the energy in, then they begin to learn how to stop creating new karma. They begin to stop. And that's step one. You stop. Right. It really is that simple. You got to start with stopping, so mm-hmm. So that's what's why this is actually an important initiation. And it seems like a really cool mythological moment in this mystical space, but there's much more to it than meets the eye. And so anyway, he's teaching me. All of a sudden, I see the powerful energy arrive. I see up in the air one of the silken angels. The dragon master is asking me something here. But he points out that the book of the Drain of the Dragons is a book of memory. It's not a book of words, but of energy, a book of memory. So when the book is given to me, I start remembering things. And I'm asking him, well, where are all those silken angels? Because all of a sudden I remember them. And he's telling me that I'm remembering, and that's all good. And then he takes me over where we're going to go to a pretty lengthy experience after this. But a couple of the most important things are, there is a battle within me, but it's experienced where I have to battle. And I believe, let me try to just take a look here to make sure I'm remembering the battle of becoming the silken angel here. There's a point where, I'll just read this part because it's about the transformation. It's kind of important. And so one day while walking along the water, lost in thoughts, I'd forgotten to pull my auric field into myself. Another woman who was just arriving was walking along the shore as a huge green tentacled dragon surfaced and immediately grabbed her. Running to her, the dragon master's voice rang in my head, "You now carry the sacred sword." Manifesting in my hand was a tool very much like a screwdriver, but slightly different. The thought of hurting the dragon repelled me, but I knew there was no other way. So I took the sword, plunged it directly into the dragon's third eye. Important point here, right?
Mm-hmm.
Feeling the pain of transformation, my hands were bleeding profusely as the dragon had sent his claws directly through my wrist, but the woman, though badly injured, would survive. Holding her injured form in my hands, I watched in disbelief as the dragon who'd appeared dead was now stirring and changing form. Energies of purple were soaring around his talons, and his tentacles were no longer solid. And a whiz of energy gyrated throughout and exploded in pink light as the dragon became a silken angel. This is an allegory of the karmic soul who achieves purification. And so you see, this is actually an initiation. And this was an initiation where I had to do this to my own dragon. Didn't realize I was fighting for my own soul in this battle. Do you see?
Mm-hmm. And so you stabbed the dragon in the eye with the sword of sacred duty?
Yes, and it was in the third eye. And the importance of being in the third eye, it's because the third eye is where our sacred vision comes from. And so he had to be stabbed in the third eye because the dragon could not see clearly. And in order for him to see clearly, he had to be stabbed in the third eye with the sword of sacred duty. And by being pierced with sacred duty in the third eye, it transformed his vision and turned him entirely into a different being. You see? And so then more here where, and I'll just read this part because this is the dragon master instructing me on what it all meant. So he said, standing at the new angel's side, the dragon master said, "You've remembered the secret of the sacred book of the Drain of the Dragons. You have drained the negativity of your dragon and transformed it into a silken angel of love. Walking forward into my soul, the silken angel became one with me as the woman who'd been hurt just got up and walked away. Being an actress, she played her part well because she was not truly injured. My tears were pink as I remembered the Amazonian secrets. The dragon," he asked. So the dragon master's asking me, well, what about the dragon? I said, "My unfulfilled potential," I replied. "The silken angel," he asked. "Potentials fulfilled," I replied. "Very good. When you look in the eyes of the dragon, you fear the part of you that has yet to be transformed, but it takes courage to bring potential to fulfillment." Approaching me, his face became serious. As a bearer of the sacred sword, I ask you to now bear service to another. Yes, I replied, whatever you ask, I will do. You've shared with me the gift of memory. And he said, I have a message for one who follows, which I'll share in a moment, but I want to go back here and talk about this. So we go back here. When you look in the eyes of the dragon, you fear the part of you that has to be transformed. This takes us back to what we talked about from the very beginning, which is how all of us are so afraid when we begin to be corrected. You know, we all fear it. We're all afraid of it. But this is one of those beautiful experiences where we are shown very visually the benefit that comes from taking that plunge and confronting those dark parts within ourselves and allowing God to take over, rather than saying, nah, that's too scary. Let me just stick with what I've got. You know, I'll continue being the dragon. The dragon's cool, you know. You know. And that's what this is what we kind of come back to again and again, which is having the courage to take that step forward, and the benefit thereof is always so much greater than the risk we're taking, right? So let's say you take a risk and it doesn't produce the benefit that you hope for. You're still losing so much less by taking that risk than anything you would gain by standing still. You know, so let's say you go along the path and you take a risk and you took the wrong one and you made a mistake. You're still doing better by doing your best and trying to move forward and making mistakes along the way than by choosing, I'm going to stand still. Dragon's cool. I'll stick with the dragon. He's kind of neat looking.
Dragons are super cool, man. Okay?
Right.
So now, right after this, you talk about the 5 mistakes, and I didn't write down what they are, but I wonder if it just pops up like right after this whole experience you had with the dragons. We talk about the 5 mistakes.
I don't know, but before we go to the 5 mistakes, I do want to talk about what the Dragon Master asked me to do.
Oh,
because it was important. And so this is something that's important for everyone. And so I'm going to just bring it up because it does come up a lot with people and it's important. So we're going to bring it up. Although the message was for someone in particular, it was truly a message for all. Holding a stick of incense which blazed at the tip, he said, many masters have shared techniques, doorways into the sacred spaces. I knew he spoke of the many forms of meditation, mantras, contemplatives, prayer, masses, etc. But the ritual is not the truth. It is the door. Use the technique for the purpose of opening the door, not as an end in itself. You must open the door in order to find sacred memory. Nodding, I understood him. Tell my honored friend this. He paused as a rainbow gyrated above the incense. So this is something that comes up repeatedly with people. They look at the techniques as being the truth itself. Out-of-body travel is not a truth. It's a technique. It's very important. It's a technique. It's a tool. It's a way that we seek out the truth. Just like every other technique, meditation is not the truth. It is a technique for which we seek the truth. Do not let the technique become a blinder to your way, because it does to many, whatever it may be. Well, if you're a churchgoer and you go to mass every week and you're like, well, I go to mass every week. That's not the only truth itself. Yes, I understand the deeper meanings of the mass and everything. But if your only truth is, I go to mass every week, that's your technique. But the truth itself is deeper. And you don't want to let the techniques, the rituals, become the truth for you. The truth itself is more, and it's different. So all of these things, remember, are the techniques, the tools. It's like having your toolbox and your hammer. Your hammers are not the house that you're building. They are the things you use to build the house. And a lot of people really get caught up in that. And they think that if they just practice techniques, that is the truth itself. It is not the truth itself. And was what's so important about that message from the master. And I have seen the importance of that message from the Dragon Master hundreds of times, I'd say many, many, many years. So what was the next one you wanted me to look up?
Well, I just, I want to say too, it's in studying Kundalini Yoga very much in depth, there's 8.4 million kriyas, and there's millions of pranayams and meditations, and you work with mudras and drishtis, and there's so many techniques, and trying to master all that, I can just see, how I've like looked at that, and other things too that I've studied where there's all these techniques, and it kind of becomes overwhelming sometimes.
Mhm.
And yeah, and I've definitely also looked at that and gone like, okay, because I've taught series that go months long on mastering the mind in meditation, or mastering the breath in pranayama, or whatever, or the mastering the chakras, or the 10 yogic bodies, or whatever the case is. And it's like, it doesn't matter if we're thinking that mastering those techniques is going to build the house, so to speak,
Right.
build our own self-awareness or consciousness or whatever it is. They're just techniques.
That's very important. Well said too. And I appreciate you sharing that, because that is such a stumbling block for so many people. Whatever path they're taking, whatever religion they're coming from, they can get very caught up in not recognizing the difference between the tools and the truth itself. Remembering again, the truth is God, and God is love. And so there's a simplicity in that. There's a complexity in it.
Yeah, and there's sometimes it's impossible
Mhm.
to let's say with the 8.4 million kriyas,
Right.
Kundalini, it's like there's no way.
You're never going to remember them all.
It's never
So
going to be
you
mastered. Right?
choose a
Yeah.
path that is compatible to you. Sometimes it changes throughout your life. It might be different at different points in your life. But again, that's okay, because when you're building a house, you'll use a hammer, then you'll use a screwdriver. At different points, you'll use window installers and a roofer. And so it's reasonable to then start seeing why, even in the out-of-body travel path, we've talked about how different spiritual teachers will come to you at different times to teach you different things. And this is because you're not going to learn just one thing in your whole entire life here. You're going to build a house. And this house is filled with different truths that become the fibers of your understanding. And so it's not going to be just one thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so we want to be careful of that, because there are, and a lot of times too, it does come with a technique like that. So it's either a particular specific meditation practice or a particular yogic practice that someone has confused in their mind as that is the truth, rather than that is the tool.
Mm-hmm. And then with the tool too, if we don't get the truth, then it's like we're a failure because we weren't able to master those tools. I mean, we tell ourselves we're a failure, like, oh, I couldn't do that. If only I could do that and master that technique, I would know the truth. So next thing was the 5 mistakes.
Okay.
That's what I wrote in short speak. And so I didn't elaborate. So I'm hoping that it was right after the drain of the
I
dragons.
found it, so we're good. This is from the Changeless Nature Words of Arya Maitreya. There are 5 mistakes: faint-heartedness, contempt for those of lesser ability, to believe in the false, to speak about the true nature badly, and to cherish oneself above all else. The ultimate true nature is always devoid of anything compounded. So it is said that defilements, karma, and their full ripening are like a cloud. The defilements are said to be like clouds. And you see, he's saying the ultimate true nature is always devoid of anything compounded. If you understand that, and how we were talking about karma is always bumping off of one another. So the true nature compounded things, these defilements, but also these things that we shoot out, these karmas that we shoot out. It's becoming seedless. You know, in the Hindu Raja Yoga technique, you know, they would be talking about how to create a seedless samadhi, which would be that you eventually cut off all the seeds that are in your karmic body to generate more existence, more karma, more, you know, so you're creating this seedless, so it's like a calm sea eventually. He's talking about this same thing here when he's talking about the changeless nature, the name of the text, anything compounded, always devoid. The ultimate true nature is always devoid of anything compounded. So we're getting rid of all those types of things that unstill the sea, the calm sea. We don't want ripples on the water. And karma is the ripples and the waves on the water. Swami Vivekananda writes very well about this, where he says that when you want to uncover the true nature of the self, that's the deepest part of the soul, the water has to be so still that you can see to the bottom of it. And so you have to calm all the ripples on the water, the waves, and the rippling and all the ruckus on top. And then the water has to completely clear and the sediments settle in order for it to be possible to then see the real self. So this is actually a really good analogy of how we are clearing out karma. It's by calming the great sea within us, which is this, you know, thrashing waves of desire, anger, craving for a variety of things, because everyone has different stuff, even though a lot of it's pretty similar. You know what I mean?
And the parallels just with cleansing the body. I've done, you know, probably all of us have done lots of detoxes and stuff, but when really cleansing the body, the first thing is to stop all the stuff that's bad from coming in. Stop, just cancel. And then start to clean out the junk that's accumulated inside. And then start to bring in the purified, the good, the nutritious, nurturing aspects into ourselves, into our body, foods and drinks and such. So it's very similar to that, to me.
It's exactly, very good analogy. It's exactly the same. And this is, you know, this is why the prescription is the same, except in spiritual content, you know.
One thing,
so you're cleaning out the spiritual body.
Vivekananda also talked about when he spoke of the yuga cycles, that when we're going through dark cycles in the yuga cycle, that the best thing that we can do is to be around masters, because the vibration is kind of like when you go to the hell realms to help people, to try to help lift them up. That vibration is so thick that they're imbued, their thoughts, their emotions, their everything is in that darkness. And so he said, Vivekananda, since you brought him up, just get around, be around a master's teachings, you know, connect to that light.
Well, and that's an excellent point. And, you know, it's interesting too, because here is another parallel between a lot of traditions, which is what I've also seen in the Jewish tradition and the Catholic tradition. in what you're saying about Vivekananda is very similar. Many of the spiritual writers always recommended that you have to purify your life in part through spiritual reading on a daily basis, And so there's this, so if let's assume you don't have a spiritual master living next door, or you just have access to one, right, available. One of the ways we have access, one of the ways we have the access is through the texts, the ancient sacred texts. And one of the things that is spoken about in like the Sikh lineage, and also in some of these yoga lineages, like the Kriya and the Raja Yoga lineage, is that these texts can be the guru, but it's really primary in the Sant Mat tradition and the Sikh tradition that the Sri Guru Granth Sahib was there to stand in the place of the primary guru, because Guru Nanak knew that there would be 10 gurus and that there would be a different world where people would not have access to their own guru nearby. So the texts became the guru.